The air in the Oval Office was likely thick with the scent of tobacco and the heavy atmosphere of a world at war, when William Donovan, the charismatic and unpredictable director of the Office of Strategic Services, decided to perform a demonstration that would become legendary in the annals of intelligence history. It was 1944, a year where the momentum of the Second World War hung in a delicate balance, and the President of the United States, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was occupied with dictating a letter to his secretary. According to the memoirs of Stanley Love, the man who served as the head of OSS, Research and Development, Donovan stood quietly behind the President, his presence perhaps unnoticed amidst the drone of dictation. With a calmness that belied the absurdity of the action, Donovan drew a pistol, aimed it into a sandbag he had brought for this specific purpose, and pulled the trigger. He did not fire just once. He emptied the entire 10-round magazine. The mechanical cycling of the slide and the expulsion of the bullet occurred within the same room where the leader of the free world sat, yet Roosevelt continued his dictation without a pause, completely unaware that a weapon had been discharged mere feet from his head. It was only when Donovan placed the smoking pistol on the desk and explained what he had just done that the President reacted. His expression, reportedly shifting from confusion to a deep, fascinated delight, marked the moment the High Standard HDM secured its place in the American clandestine arsenal. Roosevelt asked to examine the weapon, holding in his hands the physical manifestation of a new kind of warfare, one that relied not on overwhelming thunder, but on the terrifying efficiency of silence. This theatrical display was not merely a stunt. It was the culmination of a desperate technical struggle to solve a problem that had plagued the Allied intelligence community since the outbreak of hostilities. By 1942, the newly established Office of Strategic Services found itself facing a grim reality. The nature of war had evolved. It was no longer strictly defined by the movement of massive armies and artillery barrages. It now included a shadow war fought by saboteurs, spies, and resistance liaisons deep behind enemy lines in Nazi-occupied Europe and the jungles of the Pacific. These agents required tools that differed fundamentally from those issued to the infantry. A standard infantryman needed a weapon that could suppress an enemy at 300 yards and survive the mud of a trench. An OSS operative, however, needed to eliminate a sentry guarding a bridge at 3 in the morning without waking the garrison sleeping in the barracks next door. They needed to dispatch guard dogs silently, or incapacitate specific targets during a prisoner snatch while leaving others alive for interrogation. The existing armories were woefully inadequate for this task. The standard sidearms of the day, such as the loud and heavy M1911, were akin to setting off a firework in a library. Even the specialized equipment available, such as Colt Woodsman pistols fitted with antiquated Maxim silencers from the 1920s, failed to meet the rigorous demands of the field. The Maxim design reduced the report, certainly, but it could not mask the mechanical clatter of the weapon cycling, nor could it sufficiently dampen the muzzle blast to ensure safety in the extreme close-quarters environments where OSS's agents operated. To understand the magnitude of the challenge facing the OSS, one must understand the physics of a gunshot. Silencing a firearm is not merely a matter of corking a bottle. It requires defeating 3 distinct physical phenomena that occur simultaneously. The first and most obvious source of noise is the muzzle blast. When a cartridge is fired, high-pressure propellant gases expand rapidly behind the bullet, accelerating it down the barrel. When the bullet uncorks the barrel, these gases escape into the atmosphere at supersonic speeds, creating the deafening explosion associated with a gunshot. The second source of noise is the sonic crack. If the bullet travels faster than the speed of sound, roughly 1,100 feet per second at sea level, it creates a miniature sonic boom that sounds like a sharp crack of a whip. This noise is generated by the projectile itself and cannot be masked by any device attached to the muzzle. The third source of noise is mechanical. In a semi-automatic pistol, the energy of the fired round forces the slide backward to eject the spent casing, cock the hammer, and strip a new round from the magazine. This involves metal slamming against metal with significant force, a sound that is distinct and unmistakable, capable of carrying across a quiet courtyard or echoing through a hallway. To create a truly silent weapon, the designers had to address all 3 of these acoustic signatures simultaneously. The first component of the solution lay in the ammunition. The laws of physics dictated that, to eliminate the sonic crack, the bullet had to travel slower than the speed of sound. The .22 long rifle cartridge was the ideal candidate, while lacking the sheer stopping power of the .45 ACP or the 9mm Parabellum. The .22 long rifle was widely available and naturally operated at velocities that hovered near or below the sonic barrier. Particularly particularly when fired from shorter barrels. By utilizing subsonic ammunition, the engineers eliminated the sonic crack entirely, leaving only the muzzle blast and the mechanical action to contend with. However, the choice of caliber brought its own controversies. Military doctrine had long favored heavy, large-caliber projectiles for their ability to incapacitate an enemy soldier with a single hit to the torso. The .22 was considered a varmint round, suitable for training or hunting rabbits, not for combat. Yet, the OSS recognized a gruesome truth about human physiology. Shot placement mattered more than caliber. A small bullet entering the brainstem or the heart was just as lethal as a large one. In the context of assassination and sentry removal, the agent would likely be firing from point-blank range, where accuracy was guaranteed. The trade-off, massive noise reduction for a reduction in kinetic energy, was deemed acceptable. With the ammunition selected, the focus shifted to the weapon itself and the suppression system. Stanley Lovell, in his capacity as the Deputy Director of Research and Development, approached the High Standard Manufacturing Company in New Haven, Connecticut. High Standard was a respected name in the firearms industry, known for producing high-quality target pistols. They had already manufactured thousands of their Model HD pistols for the military to use as training aids. The Model HD was a robust, accurate, and reliable blowback-operated semi-automatic pistol with an exposed hammer and a steep grip angle that pointed naturally. Lovell believed this platform could serve as the host for the new silent weapon. However, High Standard made guns, not silencers. The science of suppressing a gunshot was a complex field involving fluid dynamics and acoustic engineering, expertise that a traditional gun manufacturer did not possess. In a move that exemplifies the unorthodox and innovative spirit of the American war effort, Lovell turned to an organization that had absolutely nothing to do with warfare: Bell Telephone Laboratories. The decision to contract a telephone company to design a weapon of war might seem bizarre to the modern observer, but in 1943 it was a stroke of genius. Bell Labs employed some of the most brilliant minds in the world when it came to the study of sound. For decades, their engineers had been obsessing over acoustics, sound wave behavior, and noise reduction to improve the clarity of long-distance telephone calls. They understood how sound waves propagated, how they could be dampened, and how frequencies could be manipulated. The same physical principles that allowed a voice to be heard clearly over a copper wire from New York to Chicago could be applied to trapping and dissipating the violent gases of a gunshot. In early 1943, the Ordnance Department officially awarded the development contract to Bell Labs. The specific engineers who worked on the project remained largely anonymous, their identities lost to the secrecy of wartime classified programs. They filed no patents for their work, as doing so would have created a public record of a weapon that officially did not exist. Working in the shadows, these telecommunications experts produced a design that was decades ahead of its time. The design specifications, delivered by Bell Labs in the autumn of 1943, detailed a system that was integral to the weapon, meaning the suppressor and the pistol were a single, unified entity that could not be separated in the field. This was a departure from the screw-and-cans of the previous era. The barrel of the High Standard pistol was heavily modified, featuring 4 rows of ports drilled along its length. These ports were crucial to the system's function. As the bullet traveled down the barrel, the high-pressure gases behind it were bled off through these ports into the suppressor body before the bullet even left the muzzle. This reduced the pressure of the gas significantly, so that when the bullet finally exited the gun, the resulting blast was already a fraction of its potential force. Inside the tube that shrouded the barrel, Bell Labs engineered 2 distinct chambers. The first chamber, surrounding the ported section of the barrel, was packed with a roll of zinc-plated bronze mesh. This mesh acted as a massive heat sink. As the hot gases vented through the ports, they passed through the mesh, which absorbed their thermal energy. Cooling the gas caused it to contract, further reducing its pressure and velocity. The second chamber, located forward of the muzzle, contained a stack of bronze wire screens and baffles designed to swirl, trap, and disperse the remaining gas, slowing its exit into the atmosphere to a gentle hiss rather than a violent pop. While the baffle and mesh system solved the problem of the muzzle blast, the mechanical noise of the semi-automatic action remained a liability. The clack-clack of the slide was loud enough to alert a guard in a quiet building. To address this, the engineers included a feature that was unique among American suppressed weapons of the war: a slide lock mechanism. A small lever was installed on the frame of the pistol. When engaged, this lever physically locked the slide in the forward position, preventing it from recoiling when the gun was fired. This effectively converted the semi-automatic pistol into a single-shot, breech-loading weapon. When the operator pulled the trigger with the slide locked, the gun would fire, but the slide would not move. The empty casing would remain in the chamber, and the mechanical noise was completely eliminated. The only sound was the hammer dropping and the striker hitting the primer. After firing, the operator would have to manually disengage the lock, hand-cycle the slide to eject the spent casing and chamber a new round, and then re-engage the lock if silence was still required. This feature gave the operator a tactical choice: absolute silence for the first critical shot, or semi-automatic firepower for situations where the element of surprise had already been lost or when multiple targets needed to be engaged rapidly. The training protocols developed for the High Standard HDM were as specialized as the weapon itself. To maximize the suppression, OSS agents were taught a technique that sounds crude but was scientifically sound. Before a mission, the operative would unscrew the front cap of the suppressor and fill the second chamber with a liquid or viscous substance, oil, or even shaving cream for sealing the muzzle with a piece of tape. The liquid acted as an ablative medium. When the gun was fired, the expanding gases had to vaporize the liquid before they could escape. This phase change consumed a tremendous amount of energy, cooling the gases almost instantly and dramatically reducing the sound signature. With the slide locked and the suppressor wet, the weapon was incredibly quiet. The dominant sound was often described as the click of the hammer, followed by the thud of the bullet striking the target. This was the level of performance that likely facilitated Donovan's dramatic demonstration in the Oval Office. Production of the weapon began in late 1943 under the deceptive code name Impact Testing Machines. The finished product was a substantial piece of hardware. It weighed nearly 3 pounds, a heaviness that actually aided in shooting by absorbing recoil and steadying the agent's aim. The overall length was just under 14 inches, making it difficult to conceal in civilian clothing, but manageable for a soldier in uniform or a commando with a specialized holster. The magazine held 10 rounds, a generous capacity compared to other sidearms of the era. The action was single action only, meaning the hammer had to be cocked manually for the first shot, or by the slide cycling. Agents trained with the weapon at Area B, the clandestine facility in Catoctin Mountain Park that would later be known as Camp David. There, in a building ominously dubbed the House of Horrors, agents navigated dimly lit rooms filled with pop-up targets, simulating the stress and confusion of close-quarters combat. Instructors like Lieutenant Colonel Rex Applegate and the British pioneer of close combat, William Fairbairn, taught a method of shooting that rejected traditional marksmanship. There was no time to align iron sights in a dark hallway. Instead, agents were taught instinctive pointing, extending the weapon as if it were an extension of the index finger, firing rapidly at center mass while moving. The heavy barrel and excellent ergonomics of the High Standard made it particularly well suited for this style of shooting. Comparing the High Standard HDM to its British counterpart, the Welrod reveals the diverging philosophies of Allied intelligence. The Welrod was a dedicated assassination tool, a Baltic pistol that looked more like a bicycle pump than a firearm. It fired the larger .32 ACP cartridge and was manually operated, meaning it was inherently quieter than the HDM because it had no moving parts during firing. It was the ultimate tool for a single, silent shot. However, its rate of fire was agonizingly slow. If the first shot missed, or if there were 2 sentries instead of 1, the Welrod operator was in grave danger. The American HDM, by contrast, offered a compromise. It was perhaps slightly louder than the Welrod, though the difference was negligible to the human ear in field conditions, but it offered the immense advantage of rapid follow-up shots. If a situation deteriorated, the OSS agent could flip the slide lock down and unleash 10 rounds in a matter of seconds. The OSS recognized the value of both approaches and ultimately stockpiled both weapons, issuing them based on the specific requirements of the mission. The Welrod was for the Ghost, the HDM was for the Commando. The operational history of the HDM is fragmented, reconstructed from the incomplete records that survived the post-war destruction of classified files. It is known that the weapons were shipped to the European, Mediterranean, and Far East theaters by mid-1944. They found their way into the hands of Jedburgh. Team's 3-man units consisting of an OSS officer, a British or French officer, and a radio operator who parachuted into Nazi-occupied France to coordinate resistance efforts. They were supplied to resistance cells, hidden in hay wagons and floorboards, waiting for the signal to rise up. In the Pacific, they were used in the island-hopping campaigns, where the dense jungle environment made the ability to kill silently invaluable. The psychological impact of such a weapon cannot be overstated. For enemy troops, the knowledge that a sentry could drop dead without a sound was a source of profound paranoia. It eroded morale, forcing garrisons to double the guard and creating a sense that the enemy was everywhere and nowhere. One of the most first notable public appearances of the weapon, though it was occurred in November 1944. Admiral Chester Nimitz, the Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet, had received an HDM as a personal gift from William Donovan. A photograph was published in the Philadelphia Inquirer showing Nimitz and his son, Chester Jr., at a firing range. In the photo, the distinctive, thick barrel of the suppressed High Standard is clearly visible as they take turns shooting it. This was a significant security breach, revealing a top-secret weapon to the general public. However, the caption gave no details, and the grainy nature of newsprint likely obscured the true nature of the device to the uninitiated. That specific pistol survived the war and is now preserved at the Museum of the Pacific War in Fredericksburg, Texas. A tangible link between the highest levels of command and the shadowy world of special operations. That is, the Second World War drew to a close. The OSS was disbanded, but the need for its tools did not vanish. The newly formed Central Intelligence Agency inherited the inventory of High Standard HDMs. The Cold War was beginning, and the game of espionage was shifting from the battlefields of Europe to the geopolitical gray zones of the Iron Curtain and the developing world. The HDM remained the gold standard for suppressed pistols. Its most famous involvement during this era came on May 1, 1960, when a U-2 spy plane piloted by Francis Gary Powers was shot down by a suppressor missile deep inside Soviet territory. Powers was on a mission to photograph military installations from 70,000 feet, the cutting edge of technological surveillance. Yet, in his survival kit, he carried a piece of technology from 1943, a High Standard HDM. The logic was that if he survived the ejection, he might need to hunt for food or silently eliminate a threat to evade capture. Powers was captured, and the pistol was seized by Soviet authorities. It was put on display in Moscow as proof of American espionage, a trophy that the Soviets clearly recognized as a sophisticated piece of engineering. The fact that the CIA was still issuing a 17-year-old pistol to its elite pilots speaks volumes about the quality of the Bell Labs design. The weapon saw further service in the jungles of Vietnam. The environment there was arguably even more suited to the HDM than the European theater had been. In the dense foliage, combat ranges were often measured in feet, not yards. CIA paramilitary teams, Navy SEALs, and Army Special Forces used the HDM for tunnel rat operations, prisoner snatches, and eliminating Viet Cong sentries and guard dogs. The .22 cartridge, often dismissed as underpowered, proved its lethality again and again when applied with precision. The quiet puff of the HDM became a sound associated with the terrifying suddenness of American special operations in the dark. In 1967, the military attempted to finally replace the aging HDM with a modernized version. The Frankfurt Arsenal developed a new suppressor for the High Standard pistol, utilizing modern materials and manufacturing techniques. However, in head-to-head testing, the new design was found to be bulkier and, surprisingly, less efficient at sound reduction than the original World War II model. The anonymous engineers at Bell Labs had done their work so well that 25 years of technological advancement could not significantly improve upon it.